And as I walked through the crowds, they just parted, and I walked towards the handsome soldier who by this point was looking rather gormless with his mouth wide open, wondering where did she come from. And I threw a quick glance to my two guides who I knew would be so happy that I had intervened on their behalf and that they would have appreciated this noble gesture. And they looked at me as if to say, "Lady, we were in trouble before over the camera, but now we're really in serious trouble." So it wasn't appreciated at all. We were all bundled into a car and driven off at high speed back towards the direction of Jalalabad. But something was bothering the driver and the soldier, and it was something to do with me. They kept arguing and looking round and arguing, and suddenly the driver put the emergency brakes on, and the soldier got out, and he came round to my door, opened it and pointed his Kalashnikov. He obviously wanted me to get out. I went out and was taken to this raised piece of ground, and I stood on this raised piece of ground. And then the soldier went off. He went off over this hillside, and I'm thinking, well, you know, what's going on here? So I'm standing there in this deserted area, and I'm looking round, and I looked on the ground, and all I could see were rocks and pebbles and stones. And I thought, oh my goodness, it's the stoning corner. He's gone off to get a crowd. He's probably out there now saying, "Hurry, hurry, we've got a Westerner, there'll be a stoning in 20 minutes. And I'm standing there. I mean, we're, you know, laughing, but I really thought that this is what is going to happen. I mean, you know, I was told, I was convinced that this was the most evil, brutal regime in the world. This is what George Bush and Tony Blair had said, and we know that they don't lie. So I really was terrified. So I'm standing there. I looked down at the ground, and all I could see staring back up at me was my shoes and socks had gone. I don't know where they'd gone, but all that was staring back at me was blood red nail varnish. And I thought, oh no, nail varnish is banned under the Taliban. If they see the colour of my toes, they'll probably chop them off one by one. Now, I don't know if any of you have been to Afghanistan. Please don't put your hands up if you have. But it's the sort of area that is deserted 1 minute, and the next minute it's crowded. Where the crowds come from, I have no idea. But within a few minutes, this deserted area was suddenly filled with a crowd of about 80 to 100 men. Great big angry-looking men with great big beards and big turbans, and they were just staring at me, standing on this raised piece of ground, and they were getting closer and closer and closer. And I thought, yes, they're getting closer and closer and closer because they want to take aim when the stoning starts. But of course, in their culture, they wouldn't have seen a woman's face in this way, other than a wife, a mother, a sister, a close female relative. So seeing a Westerner standing on a raised piece of ground in front of them wearing a traditional shalwar kameez and no veil must have been quite a sight. So of course they were getting closer and closer to get a better look, as they would if they were looking at a panda in the zoo for the first time. Of course I'm thinking quite the opposite, the reason that they're getting closer. And I just thought, you know, I'm going to have the most horrendous death. And it's funny how your mind turns to God in moments like this. I mean, there are very few atheists on a sinking ship. And I'm standing there thinking, I'm just going to throw myself down on my knees and I'm going to start praying. And then I thought, no, I can't do that. These are Muslims. As soon as I start praying like a Christian, they're going to start the stoning early. So my mind came back to the stoning, and I remembered as a Sunday school teacher telling the children how Jesus had stopped a stoning. He'd come across and he said, let him without sin cast the first stone. So I thought, right, I'm going to say that to this lot. The fact that they wouldn't have understood me didn't occur to me. I'm panicking as I'm thinking, you know, my final minutes on planet Earth were rapidly diminishing. So I stood there and I thought, yes, I'm going to shout, let him without sin cast the first stone. And as I looked round, I noticed 3 very elderly, wise-looking men at the back with big, long white beards, and I thought, no, maybe not, because if I shout, let him without sin, they'll say, yes, that's us, and they might just start the stoning early. So all of this is going through. We're having a laugh at the moment, but I really, really thought I was seconds away from the most horrendous death. Just then, the Taliban soldier returned. He came over the hillside and he had with him a woman wearing a burqa. She came up behind me and she swung me round and started frisking me. And I thought to myself, oh, I'm not going to die. Well, not immediately anyway. They think I'm carrying weapons. And all the fear that I'd felt seconds earlier had melted away to great relief. But the relief very quickly turned to anger. Those men behind me had made me feel as though I was seconds away from a horrendous death. So I pulled away from the Afghan woman and I swung back round at the men. And I'm standing there with my shalwar kameez, the traditional trousers and a long dress. And I screamed at the men, I am not carrying any weapons. And I picked up the hem of my dress and went, look! Yes, well, of course, it was quite a vulgar gesture and highly inappropriate behaviour from a woman in Afghanistan, and the lady wearing the burqa swung me round and smacked me across the face at doing such a terrible thing. But the reaction of the men was quite strange as well. The moment I lifted up my dress and went, look, they all collectively went, and turned and ran as though the devil was snapping at their heels. Anyway, I was bundled back into the car once they'd established that I wasn't carrying any weapons, and was driven off at a speed towards Jalalabad. Now then, I don't know how communication happens in Afghanistan, but it's very quick, very fast and very effective, and very soon the whole area was buzzing with the fact that an American spy had been captured. And at every checkpoint we came to, swarms of people gathered round to look at the car and look at the American